this episode of TAC Tic Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Bush. Join me and Jacqueline Toussard, my sister and co-host, publisher of the American Chiropractor magazine, as we interview Dr. Weston Bussler, product manager and nutrition scientist at Standard Process, which he goes into some of the details associated with how those supplements that you enjoy for yourself and your patients come to be as they explore new opportunities that science has brought forth in seed selection for enhancing nutritional profile. Standard Process raises the bar with Nutrition Innovation Center. Scientific investigation is one that appeared in the American Chiropractor, which we go even more in depth. Listen on as we join this in progress. So my name is Joe Bush. I'm the editor of the American Chiropractor magazine. Of course, we carried your interview recently about how Standard Process is raising the bar with the Nutrition Innovation Center, the NIC, there in North Carolina. This is Jacqueline Toussard. She's my sister, as well as the long time publisher of the American Chiropractor magazine. So we were just really excited to get the chance to really carry your interview in the pages, right? And we're working to have a closer relationship with our readers as well as our authors, because there's a whole nother level that we can go with these short questions that we're asking. And so, considering the huge push that Standard Process has put into really identifying the science behind why their supplements have been so effective historically, with their rich history about the whole foods supplements and natural products, your role there seems to be exactly that, identifying those things. Can you tell a bit about your background, Weston?
Yeah, sure. So my background, I got my Ph.D. at North Carolina State University, and my research consisted of trying, the essential question was, could we map health-based effects onto plant genomes, and then in the future be able to choose plants that are driving health effects in the ways that we've historically chosen plants for things like yield, pest resistance, disease resistance, all of these sorts of things. And that research finished up basically when I finished up my PhD was right the same year that they opened the Standard Process Nutrition Innovation Center on the North Carolina Research Campus. So as I was finishing up, I was able to kind of bring some of those ideas to Standard Process as they were opening that facility. And it meshed with a lot of what they'd already been doing and some of the ideas that they had for going forward from just looking at how we can continue to use things like plants and whole foods and drive a lot of the beneficial nutritional effects. And I think that so my degree is in nutrition science, but it has this emphasis in agriculture as well as food science, which really nicely works with the whole philosophy that Standard Process has. So all of those things kind of work together. And then I found this niche here working in the product development team, where we do a lot of the new product development and also look at old products and ways that we can support and further advance our products going forward.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So obviously the yield side of the different products that you're growing is important, that they're, resistant to pests rather than using any kinds of, external products.
Yeah, if you talk to any farmer, that's going to be just one of their. It's one of the primary concerns. It's really challenging to work with crops that don't yield well for a number of reasons. Not only one of them being just you don't want to have to use too much land to grow things, but on top of that, it can be really challenging, especially in organic production styles, when you have something that doesn't quite have the vigor of certain other crops, because you're dealing with a lot of these challenges on the growth end with the different naturally occurring weeds that are out there. So when you're trying to having a variety that does work in that organic production system, where we're very limited in what type of applications we can apply, like that does wind up creating an additional challenge. So you have to take yield into consideration. We can't just get rid of it. And so one of the things with a lot of these these techniques and things that we're employing is we can make sure that while we consider yield, and yield is an important factor, we're also at the same time that we're looking at that, making sure that we're bringing along some of these additional components when we make our plant selections. Since historically, we just didn't exactly know how to do that. We didn't have advanced nutritional analysis techniques when a lot of these decisions were being made in the early 1900s. And inadvertently, it led to a lot of this genome degradation and potential inadvertent loss of certain things.
That's interesting. Now, I'm a chiropractor, Dr. Bussler. Now, my sister, Jacqueline, she's more on the consumer side. So she loves,
I'm
the
the
whole food
publisher,
supplements.
but I'm an avid fan of all that is nutritional supplementation, health food, and natural health. So I love to hear what you're saying. You talk about the degradation of the genome and these plant, that's a mouthful. That's a huge mouthful there.
Yeah. And, I think oftentimes it gets characterized as that this was a purposeful thing. We were trying to make these plants yield in a way that we can assure global food supply. Like that is important. That was a very key factor in humans moving to where we're at now. But now we're just trying to take some of these advances we've made and figure out if you reboot them or you take a couple steps back in order to go a few steps forward, going there and looking at nature really has done a lot of this plant breeding work for us, and figuring out how for us, and what we'd like to do is what we'll try to do is look at our specific crops that we see some advantage in. Some of these ones aren't necessarily grown quite often. And what we'll do is then we'll check and see within these global banks of seed supplies and seed stores that those house all of the diversity of these plants. So you have these different varieties, and these are held in these seed banks, and you can get your hands on some of them, very small amounts, and then you can grow them in your environment and look and see all the wide diversity that you have in certain species. And one of the ones we've really focused on is buckwheat. That's a huge, important plant to standard process for a number of our products, and figure out all the natural diversity that exists in buckwheat, something that there hasn't been resources tied to the way that you've seen in corn and soy and rice, and just look at the ways that we can take some of these unique aspects that can do things like find a variety that has very high levels of rutin in it, or a variety that pairs that high level of rutin with a high level of mineral uptake. So you get a lot of magnesium, but then you'll also need to make sure, like we were talking about, that these things yield. And a lot of these varieties, they might be perfect from a nutritional standpoint, but they can't grow at scale. There's no possible way that they'll grow at scale. So just trying to pair those things together.
So talk about that a bit, Dr. Bussler. Is this, now we all know, of course, most of our listeners are going to know that Dr. Royal Lee was the real founder of standard process all the way back 100 years ago. So you're going all the way back to that point in time, right? And recreating these under different conditions with different strains, so they're even more robust nutrient profile, it sounds like. So has that changed some of the formulations then, or is it just mostly a specific strain modification?
So standard process has done a great job of as essentially doing a lot of this work for the entire time. So just making sure from a varietal selection, we are picking things from a plant perspective since we've had the farm that have been able to meet a lot of those key nutritional needs that we have. And there was a lot of very intriguing and out of the box thinking that Dr. Lee did as far as the different formulations and the way that he put things together. There's a wealth of knowledge that we have in all of those different archives that he produced while he was at standard process. I mean, there's so much depth of the work that he did, and he was very prolific in all that and all of the research that he was putting forth. And it's really amazing when you look at some of these varieties. So many of the plant varieties of these things, like buckwheat and stuff, those were produced via nature. So they've been around for They've been around for a very, very long time. And it's hard to say exactly when a lot of them showed up, but what you'll get is when researchers are out there collecting, trying to find these unique varieties, they'll go and they'll be out in the wild and find some that are unique, grab some of those seeds, go back to the database. Other ones have been produced in a breeding program, and then those ones will be submitted to that group. So what you have in buckwheat is a plant that was primarily brought to the United States from other parts of the world. You have a lot of these varieties from a lot of the Himalayan regions of the world. You have very unique buckwheat varieties there. A lot of the same varieties that you would have seen, I guess, in right around the 1930s and 1950s, most of those hadn't approached that extreme levels of breeding, and buckwheat really never got the resources towards breeding that another crop that really took off in the United States would have had. So you don't have some of these same things, but a good example of one that maybe did have those resources is something like oats. So the modern oat is a very unique plant. And I mean, now I'm worried because I'm starting to get too far into the weeds here, but the modern oat is an incredibly complex genome. It's actually 3 different ancestral genomes make up the modern oat in that single organism. You have those 3 genomes or the 3 sets of chromosomes that ultimately broke apart and reassembled at different parts of those chromosomes. So it might be a top half of one of them and a bottom half of another. Some of them completely fell out of this genome over time. And in the end, what you have is a size of genome that they measure it in what are called gigabases. So the human genome, for perspective, is about 3 gigabases, and the oat genome is 12, 13 gigabases. So it's just massive. And at some point in about the early mid 1900s, somebody figured out how to turn on a gene in the oat that created this high amount of carbohydrate storage. So you just have a bigger, more palatable crop that starts yielding better and better and better. But since it's such a complex and complicated genome, trying to do things like taking that and then having more of those nutritional profiles of some of those early varieties that have a lot more of these phytonutrients, or they're smaller, so they just have more surface area to them. And that more surface area leads to more of the outside regions that contain a lot of these beneficial vitamins and nutrients. They just sort of fell out of favor for these modern oat varieties. And trying to put back those things, because oat's so complicated and complex, you have a lot of challenges from a plant production standpoint. So the producers of those seeds will really struggle to fit something new in, because you have those 3 different ancestral genomes. And anytime you try to get one thing to work in it, you'll ultimately have another section of that gene in a different part of that genome just turn on, and it might be less efficient. So you might have made your selection based off that, but it's still going to have this other thing that takes a lot of the resources away from the things that you're trying to get it to produce. So
well, I think that's very interesting, as a matter of fact. And I think it sounds like something that is probably happening all across the food supply, that you're really focused on it as a, supplement and nutrient supplier for the patients that use this material. But I think it must be happening across all vegetables, right? So where there's a sacrifice for efficiency that's done by a mass producing, entity, and then if you really want to extract the nutrients, I mean, this is the exact message that organic and whole foods type supplements have, is that, you're taking the nutrients from the ground. Sometimes you need supplements because you're not getting enough of them. And so you mentioned oats. Now, what is that? Have you identified a specific strain that you're really working to grow that profile on? Or is there anything coming forward that we should know of?
This has been an effort that we've really, really pushed for in the past 4 years since I've been here. We've been targeting oats as an area that we can make a very big impact in. It's something we grow well in Wisconsin. that's one of our big limitations at Standard Process. Our farm is in Wisconsin. We can grow things that work in the short growing season that we have there. And one of the crops that does pretty well for us is oats. And we looked at a huge variety set of oats. And I was talking about that complex, complicated genome. That's part of what you would call the common oat that creates that complex genome. Mm-hmm. However, there are simpler genome oats. So these different species of oats that are going to be something as simple as what we call a diploid. A diploid's just one copy of the chromosomes, and that makes them a lot easier to work with, potentially more nimble from an environmental standpoint in certain instances. But we were able to take some of these ancient, we call them land races. So these are going to be those unique varieties created in nature that exist, and find them that express a lot of the nutrient profile of what we're looking for. And for this, we call them the ancient oats. There really hasn't been an ancient oat. You'll hear about ancient wheats like kamut or other ancient grains. People talk about quinoa a lot. But then bringing in something like an ancient oat is a very unique aspect. So these oats fell out of favor in about the late 1800s. They used to be used as forage oats. They grow pretty well. They grow really tall. They grow tiny grains in comparison to regular common oats. They're still similar in total size, but you're talking about maybe about 40 to 50% of the grain size. And these ones we've looked at for a while now. These are very unique because they have a significantly higher amount of protein. So your protein content in them can go from your common oat is going to be anywhere from about 11 to 14% for pretty nice protein on your oat. This one's uppers of about 19.5, 20%. And then things like your essential nutrients across the board are higher. Almost all of the essential nutrients, minerals and vitamins, all significantly higher in this base of oat. So you can, and why I love oats, and from a supplement perspective, is people can eat a lot of oats. You can have big serving sizes of oats. So they're really a cool product that you can work with. But we're looking at a number of different ways that we can implement these and start introducing them into the product line. And we have a lot of things on the horizon trying to utilize these oats that were historically used quite frequently for consumption, but they just fell out of favor once you had that more productive modern oat variety. But from a yield perspective, I mean, that's one of the difficult things here is when you're dealing with this at scale, you have to consider that you're going to get 50% of the yield that you would get for these oats. So what might have taken you only 20 acres to grow, now we're having to commit 40 acres to that.
Right.
And that's a difficult thing when you're talking about groups that are trying to produce large amounts for the markets that have really, really chased these lower and lower price points because they're trying to sell at bigger and bigger scale and trying to continue to push that consolidation of the market to just a few groups. And then those groups are the main purchasers and buyers. But for us controlling the vertical integration here, and to this point, us also trying to get to the level where we are taking ownership on the seed end, and we're playing a big role in that side of the seeds. That's taking a lot of that. It moves that risk point for us at Standard Process into a way that we do have access to the development of these key seeds, and we have the ability to produce them, and we're not at risk of all of a sudden just being like, no, we're not going to grow those anymore. Those aren't available. This is something that we then can use going forward. But it's very unique switching to these varieties. We're really excited about all the potential that they're going to have for a number of different products.
Very interesting. So it's really farm to plate at this point, right? So you guys are, of course, taking on higher margins associated with the growth of these nutrient rich oats and maybe even buckwheat, I think you mentioned.
Sorry, what do you mean by higher margins?
Well, I mean, there are more like financial margins behind the investment, as with the more acreage to create a less robust yield.
Yeah. So so for us, and sorry, I'll let you jump back. I shouldn't.
Well, I was just trying to figure out how did that work into the actual supplement. For example, I know they had a pediatric gummy supplement that has been released recently, right?
Oh, the chewable. The chewable.
Yeah, sure. So how does that work into into what goes there? I mean, I know this is a huge process that you guys use in order to make these things happen.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a bit about that? How does that translate into, like, say, something that's more, bioavailable for the patient that may be taking it? Maybe it's not the pediatric gummies. Maybe it's another thing.
So, yeah, as far as trying to work with something that maybe yields at a different rate. So these are harder to grow. The scale that at this point that we're producing these at really allows us that opportunity to try to, instead of changing what a lot of our targets might be to what other groups' targets might be. So another group's target might be more so just pounds of material. For us, what becomes important is the dose of what we're delivering is a really important thing. So while it might actually be less yield on that basis, the potency of what we're delivering from the active. So all of a sudden we can go from having to suggest a person take 3 30-gram scoops a day. You can try to then bring something like that down to 1 12-gram scoop a day in order to get that same active. So we can, by making it more potent, make some more potent products. And looking at the plant end of that plant supply, that's something that's very unique to us, having that vertical integration that we have, that we can target it at that spot. And then product selection is, like you're saying, super important. And we have this new children's chewable supplement that we're very excited about. And that pairs a lot of these key ingredients that we're sourcing, certain things that we can't grow, with something like the beets that we grow on our standard process farm that we know deliver nutrients in a nice way, and we grow them pretty well. So we like to use those where we can.
Very interesting. Jacqueline, what do you think?
Well, it sounds like you guys are so far in the weeds there. I wanted to bring it back up in the global view because you're getting too deep for all of us. But I wanted to make sure, because as a broad overview, I was thinking, Dr. Bussler, it's Dr., right? Weston. I wanted to find out this is the first time we actually get to talk with anybody from the Nutrition Innovation Center, which we all refer to lovingly as the NIC.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to give us just a quick background, because I don't know if many of our listeners even probably it's been so recent since its establishment, how long you've been around, and the global view over that as well with its relation to standard process. Is it testing efficacy of existing product lines, or is it mostly for new product development, or a little bit of both?
Yeah. So the NIC opened in Kannapolis, North Carolina in 2018. So that's when we initially opened the doors down here. Mm-hmm. And so I guess we're going to be coming up on 5 years here pretty soon. But the goal of this facility is to utilize a lot of the benefits on being on this campus, or access to a lot of partnerships with universities and different areas and researchers, to try to look both at what's made a lot of these standard process products very effective to this point, learn a lot more about those mechanisms, figure out ways that we can continue to add and advance the evidence behind that, figure out ways that we can, in certain cases, make those beneficial tweaks, and then pair that ultimately with new product development and looking at ways that Standard Process can continue to make those important advancements that they've been making for 90 years and keep responding to the changing environments and new technologies and utilize those. So it's been a really good way to partner and balance and drive a lot of this new research that we're doing.
Well,
Very
when you
good.
talk about the crops you guys have and everything, I'm thinking about everything, as a consumer, we're so fearful now about the GMO food, and everything is GMO anymore. So to get to talk with somebody who actually is so close with the farm, the seeds, the product, I'm just happy to know somebody who's actually still got the non-GMO version of anything. To me, it seems like anybody has to use a supplement anymore with their diet, because the majority of the food that we're all interacting with and the products we're using are deficient. So yeah, it kind of is, it's very eye-opening for us. And we're glad to have you guys there in the research end too, to make sure and kind of know that what we're getting, it sounds to me as I'm listening to you talk about it, that they're designer supplements that you guys, like a lot of people will think, oh, just take this, take that, take a multi, this and that. But to me, over all the years I've studied on this too, is you want to make sure that you're working with people who've got, working with authentic, whole food. It's definitely the best way to go if you can do it that way, and people who are researching what they're doing. So we're glad to tell you guys. It's honored that we get to work with you.
So it's a unique spot, and I don't want to overshadow the crops are one piece that we look at here. There's a lot of additional things that we try to make sure that we're researching and figuring out how we can use a lot of these key beneficial ingredients and continue to be very, very driven by a lot of these big advancements. And I think when you're dealing with a very rich history of products, it is a very unique setup, because we do have a lot of these things that we've heard for years and years and years about how these work for me. These can be life-changing in order to, these have been life-changing additions for me. And taking that and making sure that we take all that into account as we look at a lot of these products and figure out, okay, so here's what we're saying. Sometimes we'll hear things about how the field winds up learning about things and things that they've figured out in the field and trying to apply that there. So we have done things like that in order to initiate certain studies and try to deliver a clinical study based around ways that things are being used on the market, and try to learn more and more about that. So that's been one really, really unique aspect. From the breeding side of things, as far as what you're referring to, so a lot of the work that we're doing from this very traditional breeding sense essentially comes down to figuring out which parents to have the plants use as that base. So those two parent bases, and a lot of the work that we're doing now hasn't really been applied as regularly to that specific growth techniques that we like to use, and the ones that Standard Process prefers using. So that would be trying to make sure that, like I was talking early about some of those very, very difficult challenges with weed pressure and things, and also the Wisconsin environment. And I don't know if everybody's noticed this year, but it's just been a very darn hot year. So making sure that you have plants that can survive in a lot of that extreme heat and still thrive. Like, we need things that are going to be able to continue to respond to any kind of environmental stimuli that they can come up to, and still deliver that nutrient punch and that that delivery that we're looking for in these products, and the ones that our customers really, really deserve. So we're going to continue to try to do this. And, sometimes it's a plant solution, sometimes it's a technology solution as far as how we process the plants. So things that new machines that we can bring in, trying to deliver variety, or trying to deliver more and better products that way. And, keep up. Like, standard process. We see the power of these supplements, and we don't want to stop the availability for them. We want to be able to continue to expand and meet that growing need that people have, since our population, 50% of individuals now have some sort of longstanding condition. You're talking about growing amounts of people that are dealing with very difficult issues.
Right. Well, and then now going back to even that pediatric product you had, I was curious if any of that coming out now is a result even from COVID, from this overwhelming fear, or if that was just something that was already in the works anyway. Is it kind of by popular demand?
Well, so it's interesting. The way a lot of the supplement market moves, it can start chasing things sometimes. Mm-hmm. And the past 2 years, trying to maintain immune health and immune support has been top of mind and a very key issue for individuals. And we wanted to make sure that we had a very strong children's product that was going to come out in time for back to school season. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about doing this for a very long time, trying to look at a way that we can deliver a lot of these nutrients that we know people aren't getting enough of in the diet. So
I can't get my kids to eat vegetables anymore.
And that's a significant challenge. It's really, I have 2 kids. I have one more on the way, and trying to find something from a format perspective that works for kids, mm-hmm. from a flavor perspective, is something that they can tolerate, and it's something that they don't get tired of right away. That is a development challenge for a product, especially when you're trying to do it with some limitations around what ingredients you use.
Yeah.
Weston, I don't think that Jacqueline's kids necessarily get tired of the way she prepares her vegetables. It's a joke, Weston. It's a joke. No, only kidding. But so yes, I have the same struggle, right? So Weston, we're just about out of time. Any final words for the listeners? Any new things they should be looking for on behalf of Standard Process coming forward? Anything that you think they should know as a healthcare practitioner trying to provide the highest support for their patients?
Well, definitely the Standard Process, we're continuing to innovate, and we're continuing to push the bounds. And we're going to keep coming out with these very innovative new products. And one of the things that we're really excited about, myself from the farm end, is we now have our farm grown hemp that we're going to be launching very soon, as a way that we can continue to deliver that SP farm into our products that our practitioners are we're very thankful that they love utilizing and using with their patients. But additionally, trying to utilize things like the microbiome test kits and pairing a lot of these more advanced technologies and pairing those with product selection and trying to learn as much as we can about that. And we're really adding a lot of new studies, and we have many going in the background, and continuing to try to work with practitioners such as yourself to study our products, figure out ways that we can use them, and continue to add that evidence. So that would be the biggest thing that we've been really trying to push since we opened the Nutrition Innovation Center. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you for your time, Jacqueline. Anything that you wanted to add? I hope to meet you one of these days, Dr. Bussler, in live. So, Jacqueline, anything else that you'd like to ask?
Just to keep drawing everyone's attention. If you want to look at the basics on it, it's in the latest issue of the American Chiropractor, the September issue coming up. So we definitely look forward and thank always Standard Process and you guys over at the NIC there for helping to keep us all in optimal health and at the top of our game, and keep looking forward and backwards, studying all the genome issues we've got to be looking out for.
Exactly.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.